So, Anthony, in this
Yeah.
lesson, I'd like to discuss a little bit about spiritual bodies.
Mm.
And Walter Bauer,
Yes. Yes.
so Walter Bauer in the Lexion of New Testament Greek on the kingdom talks about sinful men not inheriting the kingdom.
Yes.
And then that for Paul, the kingdom is essentially future,
Good point.
and that flesh and blood, I think that means mortals, will not
Absolutely.
inherit it.
That's right.
Spiritual bodies are required for entrance. And then if we go to 1
Yes.
Corinthians 15, 35 through 58, if I
Yes.
may read just a
Yes,
few,
please.
I'll just take a few things out of there to
Yes.
address.
Good.
It talks about heavenly bodies and earthly bodies,
Yes.
or the body sown is perishable and what is raised is imperishable.
That's right.
Sown as a natural body, raised a spiritual body.
Yes.
And then the question or comment is, if there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body.
Yes, that's right.
And then
Spiritual body. Yeah.
right, in verse 47, that says, the first man is from the earth, made of dust, and the second man is from heaven. For the perishable body must put on the imperishable, and this mortal body must put on immortality. So if you could
Yes.
comment a little bit about
Yes.
the difference in those two bodies, and that the spiritual body, it doesn't mean that Jesus was resurrected as some wispy spirit
No.
or a ghost of some kind.
No.
And just give us a little bit more understanding on the
Yes.
comparison of those two bodies.
Well, exactly. Let's start with Jesus himself. He said, after he was resurrected, touch me, look at me. I'm not a spook. I'm not a phantasma in the Greek. I'm not a ghost. And then he said, let's have some food together. So, what's a spiritual body? It's not an invisible, fantastic, non visible person. It's touchable and recognizable. And he then said, I have flesh and bones. Interesting. You can see that this spiritual body that he has as a resurrected person is not a disembodied soul. It's a body with flesh and bones. That's absolutely clear. And so that's the way you will be in the resurrection. You'll be resurrected to be recognizable. Jesus said, when you see Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom and yourself being rejected, that's a terrible threat. But you see Abraham and Isaac, you recognize them as real persons. Now, they have spiritual bodies. That's an idea that you have to get hold of. You've got a physical body now. And what you're called now is flesh and blood. Flesh and blood means you in your present human condition. You cannot inherit the kingdom in that condition. So, flesh and blood is a human being in his present visible human form, flesh and blood. You cannot inherit the kingdom. So, what has to happen? You have to put on a new set of clothes known as a spiritual body. And that's exactly what Jesus demonstrated, he being the only one who has been resurrected to immortality, that is. That's absolutely true, because people like Lazarus and Dorcas in Acts were not resurrected to immortality. They later died. Jesus, however, was resurrected to immortality. In that condition, he's able to walk through the walls even. He's certainly able to eat. He said, let's have food together. And he said, touch me. I'm not a ghost. I've got flesh and bones. Interesting. I'll leave aside the blood part. I don't know exactly how that works, but he's certainly a physical, touchable person in a spiritual body. So, spiritual body is not a non touchable, invisible person at all, although he can still walk through the walls even and just show up in supernatural ways. We'll have to wait to see the detail of that. But a spiritual body is then a body given to believers in the resurrection, or if you have long life enough that you live until the second coming, we don't know when that will be, then you will get that spiritual body, what Paul then describes, as Tracy was just reading, a body which is spiritual, not the physical flesh and blood body that you have currently. Does that cover the ground?
Yeah, thank you. I think what I've found the biggest thing in
Mm,
1 Corinthians 15 is
yeah.
talking about the perishable and imperishable.
Yes.
And so what is mortal and what is immortal? I think those are the two big differences of the body. Whatever
Absolutely.
type of body it is, I think
Yes.
the main thing we need to understand
Yes.
is this natural body or the perishable body is what we have now that can die and return to dust.
That's right.
Whereas the immortal or imperishable body
Yep.
that we need to put on, that's the spiritual body, whatever that means.
Correct. It's indestructible. You're absolutely right. It's still a body, but it's an indestructible body, not from the ground made of dust, but conferred upon us as a new set of clothing, and it's indestructible.
I would like to comment on, you mentioned Jesus walking through walls, and I preached that once when I was doing a sermon, and I had someone raise the question and said, it doesn't say he walked through the wall. And I said, well, let's look at the text.
Yeah.
And it says the door was locked and then he appeared. So now I'm careful not to say he walked through the wall. I don't know. Did he walk through the wall? Did he appear like Star Trek, beamed from here to there? We don't know how that happened.
Don't know
All we
how
know
that
is he
happened.
appeared in that room.
Yes, and the doors were locked.
Yes. And so we do have a little glimpse of maybe what that body is like or what will be capable of doing. But I think it's easy to read things in. People think, oh, we'll be flying here and be flying there. We are raised up to meet him in the air.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that we're flying all around. But could we? We could. We don't know. And so I think we just have to wait and see what it's going to be like. But as God said, no eye has seen or ear has heard what God has prepared for us.
For those who love him, absolutely.
Yes. So
Good point.
Thank you for that on the spiritual body.